It was evening outside. However, the streets were not quiet at all. People were having fun, and fireworks were sparkling. A festival was taking place in the capital of the country, during which everyone forgot what boredom and sadness were. Girls were dancing on the stage, musicians were playing, people were clapping their hands. All this was watched from afar by a lonely girl standing under a tree. The girl was in the company of a fairy whose name was Fairy. The girl asked the fairy how she knew she was here. The fairy replied that there was a very sweet smell coming from her. Fairy asked the girl if she missed the people. During every festival, she went out and watched completely from the outside. But the girl was just curious about what the people were doing during the festival. The girl remembered that the Prime Minister had announced that a grand suppression of monsters would be organized with the new year. It was all for the safety of the citizens of his city and for the well-being of the Emperor's deeply esteemed majesty. The fairy snatched a leaf floating on the wind and handed it to the girl. It was an announcement of the defeat of the monsters of the Empire. The territory of the raid was the Voltaire Forest. Voltaire Forest was the home of the girl and the fairy. It turned out that the city people were going to raid their territory and exterminate all the forest creatures. The girl's name was Armonia. She was the daughter of the Duke of Felborn. As a child, she remembered holding a mysterious stone, something similar to obsidian. She would show it to her father and tell him that a friend from the forest had given it to her. The man did not understand what friends from the forest could be. Suddenly, he heard his personal guard start an alarm, shouting that monsters had been discovered. The Duke needed to give an evacuation order as soon as possible. Out of the thick of the forest came a huge monster, of enormous size. Its skin was green and fangs protruded from its lips. The monster began to stare at the girl with its red eyes. However, at the sight of the creature, little Armonia was not frightened. She ran out to meet it and jumped onto its huge arms. It turned out that the little girl and the huge beast were good friends. But that day, the estate descended into chaos. Miraculously, there were no casualties. All the guards in the duchy were looking only for Armonia. The emperor was furious. Monsters attacked in packs almost every day, so he was so anxious that he couldn't even sleep a wink. He believed that Princess Armonia was the cause of what was happening. The monarch ordered to send the little girl away and added that if things continued like this, all the people in the duchy would be in danger, and the princess alone would be to blame. After these words, the little girl ran out of the building and went into the forest to think it over. The emperor's words were still echoing in her head, that all the deaths and tragedies caused by the monsters were because of her. The girl's cries were heard by the very monster that Armonia had seen back in the morning. He held out his hand to her and told her not to cry, for a smile suited her much better. The monster heard everything that was troubling his little friend. Since her banishment was inevitable, the girl realized that now she had to go to the monster house, a place where she was welcome. 17 years had passed since that moment. Armonia and her monsters had never once left the forest. From then on, she lived with her new relatives in perfect harmony. Armonia returned to the monster village. She looked around at all the fantastic creatures living in the forest that she considered friends. She swore to herself that she would protect her home at all costs. There were voices inside the house. Someone was asking Armonia if she really wanted to go on a journey. The girl was sure of herself. Since the people had decided to disturb the forest, which had remained untouched all this time, they must have been confident of their victory. The girl needed to talk to their head and work things out. At any rate, Armonia thought that going to contact the humans was far better than doing nothing and losing everything as a result. In addition, some of the monsters decided to travel with the girl. The big monster, who had already aged a bit, gave the girl a pendant that would protect her in case of danger. Armonia left her home for the first time in 17 years and went on a long journey to protect herself and her new family, which had become much more dear to her than her real one. To begin with, the girl decided to go to the village. But when Armonia came to civilization, she had absolutely no idea what she should do. Armonia asked her monster friends to be patient for a while and hide. The girl thanked them and told them that she would move as fast as she could. The girl began to walk around the streets of the village, completely oblivious to what a hectic life was going on in civilization. While she watched from quite a distance, she was unaware of the fact that absolutely everything could be bought at the market. Armonia wasn't used to using money in the monster village. Now she needed to exchange something in return for a few coins to last for a while. The girl's bag contained troll blood, a dagger too mediocre to sell, and maple sap, which was an untouchable supply. In short, she had nothing to sell except a very beautiful stone. The fairy told the girl that she could secretly steal money from someone as well. It wasn't a bad idea, but if they were caught, they would be in big trouble. For his part, the cute little monster named Lime said that he could just eat the person and there would be no evidence left. Turning her head, Armonia saw a crowd of people gawking at something. The girl walked over to the notice board, but due to the large number of people, she couldn't see anything. People were whispering amongst themselves about a planned raid on the Voltar forest and about a girl with hair the color of water who was controlling those creatures. The words of the people hurt the girl deeply. The people she had met up until then thought the monsters were a threat to them. They spoke of them as stupid creatures that couldn't solve anything with words, but used or only violence. But those who didn't try to make contact, but boldly decided to carry out suppression by force, were not monsters at all, but humans themselves. Armonia looked at Lime with pitying eyes and realized that the humans had been the first to reject the innocent creatures. Now they intended to wipe out her home and harm her family. The girl swiveled her head and tried to find any sign that announced a place where she could sell some jewelry and make some money. Finally, she found a pawn shop and headed inside. Inside, she was greeted in a friendly manner by a man with a twisted mustache with an interesting beard. Armonia said she would like to sell the gem. The salesman immediately asked her to show her the item. He gently took the stone in his hand and began to examine it with a small magnifying glass. The salesman's eyes popped out on his forehead. It was as if he recognized something different in this stone. He abruptly changed his expression and immediately asked the girl how much she planned to sell it for. The girl realized that the bargaining moment was about to begin. She coughed and then asked the seller how much money he thought she had. Suddenly, Armonia heard someone's laughter behind her back. The guy behind her took off his hood and exposed his long black hair. He said that wasn't the best way to bargain. The guy told the girl that her lack of human interaction was very conspicuous. He also added that what she brought with her was not jewelry. The stone that Armonia brought with her was magical. It was a mineral that was used to lure monsters. However, it seemed delusional to the girl as these stones were scattered all over the forest. The girl didn't pay attention to the words and still asked the seller how much money she could get by selling the stone. But the guy said that he was buying the mineral himself and would pay whatever price the girl named. The lad named a sum of 200,000 gold pieces. Suddenly, the seller, not wanting to let such a valuable mineral out of his hands, began to offer an even higher sum. The pawn shop abruptly changed into an auction place. The girl interrupted the two arguing with each other and said that she had come to this store to sell the stone legally. So she decided to give it to the man with the mustache, the owner of the pawn shop. The man got excited and immediately ran off to get the money. Although the girl didn't know how much the magic stone was really worth, thanks to the guy with long hair, she was able to bargain easily. However, she didn't realize what was wrong with his face. The guy was looking at her in a very disdainful manner. However, Armonia didn't care about the guy's facial expression. His mood didn't bother her at all. But he turned to her abruptly and said that he wanted to ask her something. He asked the girl where she had found a magic stone of such a high grade. Armonia replied that she had found it in the grass near her home. The pawn shop owner handed Armonia 2 bags of gold and asked her to come by again. At this time, the question did not leave the boy's mind where the girl lived, if she could find such a precious stone. The girl came to the hotel, intending to spend a few nights in it. The woman inside the store greeted Harmony in a friendly manner and asked her if she just wanted to grab a bite to eat or stay the night. Harmony said she wanted to stay for 3 days without companions. The woman replied that the cost would be 7 silver coins. However, Harmony did not have silver. Gold was a much larger denomination than silver. The girl placed 1 silver coin on the table. The woman immediately gave her change in the amount of 3 silver coins. The hotel was called Monsters Haven, which interested the girl quite a bit. Armonia asked the woman if the monsters could also happen to sleep in her room. The woman said that the girl had it all wrong. Her hotel didn't live up to its name. Monster hunters often stayed at this hotel, so that was why the name attached itself. Moreover, She added that mindless monsters have no business staying at her hotel. Realizing that the hotel manager is just like the rest of the people, Armonia turned around and left for her room. That she opened the door to her room as Fairy and Lime immediately began to enjoy the change of scenery. The room was quite nice. For such a low cost, it looked quite well maintained and decent. Inside was a large bed, a large closet, and a few tables. Armonia's little friends immediately began to settle in. They had spent the whole day inside the girl's bag, and now they were immensely happy to finally feel the fresh air. Looking at the monsters, Armonia felt embarrassed that they had to hear such words from the manageress. Fairy immediately assured her friend that she had nothing to worry about. They heard such unpleasant words from people every day and had gotten used to it. Armonia wished with all her heart that her friends didn't take such words for granted. She needed to meet with the head of the offensive operation as soon as possible and talk to him about everything. Armonia rose from her knees and decided to go in search of the head of the operation. The fairy immediately told her that the girl wasn't rested yet, and she shouldn't have been so raring to go. Lime began to beg the girl to take them with her, since they had performed so well on the way out of Voltaire's forest. But Armonia said she would go alone, for she wanted to study the announcement she had seen earlier. Despite the worries of her friends, Armonia promised that she would be back in just an hour. She grabbed her cape and headed out the door. On the way, Armonia stopped by the store and bought some fruit for the fairy and Lime. The fruits were similar to forest fruits, but their flavor was slightly different. Walking over to the bulletin board, the girl found the very same advertisement for exterminating the monsters of the Empire. It said that the monsters were becoming more and more ferocious, so it was decided to recruit mercenaries to carry out a punitive operation. There was no restriction on assistance. One Voltar forest was an unknown space, so the document asked for attention that an aptitude test was provided. Ownership of trophies, such as monsters' blood, horns, skins, and other things obtained during the hunt was recognized. However, the rest of the resources of the Voltaire forest belonged to the Empire, so using and damaging them was forbidden. Those who wished to participate could apply at the reception desk, which was located across the street from the Imperial Palace in the capital. The responsibility for participating in the punitive operation rested entirely on the mercenaries themselves, and no compensation would be paid in case of death. The remuneration was to be paid based on the rate of 10 gold per day per person if the operation was successfully completed. The government was eagerly awaiting applications from talented swordsmen, mages, and monster scientists. The head of the Imperial Monster Extermination Committee, Chancellor Haida, had written just such an announcement. Based on what she read, Armonia realized that this Chancellor Haida was envious of everyone. Therefore, the girl had to go to the capital to meet him. Behind her back, the girl heard someone's voice asking her if she was really interested in punishing monsters. The person coming up behind her was the same guy that Armonia had met at the pawn shop. They met again. The guy walked closer to the girl, looked her over, and said she didn't look like a swordsman. He suggested that she might be a mage. The guy didn't understand why Armonia had come to gawk at the announcement. He said that since she had decided to take part in the monster raid, she must have a gifted ability in one of those realms. Armonia said that the guy had it all wrong. She didn't have the slightest thought of participating in the raid. She asked why on earth people couldn't just leave the monsters alone. The boy remembered his childhood. He remembered a scary picture of a huge monster staring at him from a broken window, its mouth covered in blood. He was sure that monsters were the embodiment of evil that should not be in their world. He believed that monsters brought terror by their mere existence. The boy admitted that he would be very grateful if this raid on the monsters was successful. These words hurt Armonius very much. She threw a piece of peach at him and started yelling that he knew nothing at all about monsters. The girl started calling the guy various words that she had heard during her stay in the Voltar forest. She said he was just awful and ran away. The boy thought for a moment. Armonia's bag was full of peaches, but she couldn't eat them all. That meant she had companions. Especially when they ran into each other at the store, she didn't strike him as a greedy person. Nor did she seem unaccustomed to the local environment. He assumed that, judging by the girl's habit of familiarity, she was from the aristocracy or the daughter of a well-bred merchant. The boy only had to look at her face to be fully convinced of his thoughts. He couldn't believe that in the village of Voldbrin, where the hostility level was off the charts because of the Voltar forest, There was a person who defended monsters. He had gotten the idea to find out a little more about Armonia. An enraged Armonia flew back into her hotel room. Fairy and Lime immediately asked her what was wrong. She told them about the man who seemed to have all the troll filth from all over the forest mixed in him. Fairy and Lime immediately surrounded their friend. They agreed with her that he was really nasty since she was talking like that. The girl said she didn't want to see him again at all. Lime asked Armonia what he had done, but the girl didn't feel like talking to her friends about it at all. She didn't even know what words to choose. She collapsed on the bed and said that he was just incredibly rude. The fairy started to swear and said that this was the reason she had asked Armonius to let her come with her. But the girl said it was fine and she would forget it like a bad dream. Besides, she felt that staying here for 3 days was a waste of time. Armonia suggested that they buy up everything they needed and set off to look for the Chancellor in the Empire's capital. Fairy and Lime agreed with her and said they would do anything their friend suggested. Armonia smiled and thanked her friends. She said that she needed to rest now and get a good night's sleep for tomorrow, so that she could hit the road with a fresh head. The girl hugged Lime, curled up and fell into slumber on the spacious bed. Fairy carefully covered her friend with a blanket. She didn't know if it was right for her friend to be interacting with people like this. It seemed dangerous to her, but the fairy was still grateful to Armonia for doing a great job. The next day, Armonia was already wandering around the shops looking for anything she could use for the trip. In the end, she bought jerky, a compass, a map, and a guidebook. However, if they needed anything else, they could get it at any time. Lime asked the girl where they were headed. Armonia replied that the shopkeeper had told her that there was a carriage booking place nearby. They could get to the capital by renting transportation. Armonia's nerves immediately made themselves known. She had never rented a carriage on her own. Armonia couldn't believe her ears when she heard from the girl that renting a carriage was impossible. Armonia wondered what other way there was to get to the capital. However, in this village, there was no chance of that. The girl at the ticket office said that Armonia should go to the village of Hov. There, she could find a carriage to the capital. Except it would take a whole week to get there. Offended, Armonia walked away from the cash register and, without looking in front of her, ran into the very guy she had been talking to yesterday. The guy immediately rejoiced and said that since fate had brought them together, he had a lot of things he wanted to say to the girl, but Armonia herself didn't want to talk to him at all. The boy laughed and said that the peach the girl had thrown at him yesterday was of the highest grade, for the fragrance was still audible and lasted a long time. Armonia paid no heed to the lad's words and was about to leave, but he took her by the shoulder and said that was not all. He said that the clothes thrown away because of the peach were worth twice the value for which the girl had sold the magic stone. Realizing that the girl didn't have that kind of money, she remembered an old trick that a witch had taught her in the forest. Now was the perfect time to use it. Armonia immediately started screaming at all throats for the guy to leave her alone. She began to ask for help from the people around her, saying that the pervert had started molesting her as well. Several thugs came up to the guy and took him by the arms, which Armonia took advantage of and quickly ran away. The guy did not give up and asked the girl to stop and listen to him, but by that time she had already fled. As she was leaving, Armonia heard someone in the crowd recognize the guy and address him by his name, Khan. The girl thought it was a very strange name for a human. The guy was not in the least angry. He was tired of repeating that his name was Chancellor Heidi, but the bully wasn't the type to just take his word for it. He asked the guy for proof. Heidi realized he couldn't afford to let the girl out from under his nose. He pulled from his robe a raid permit with the Emperor's seal. That was enough for the thug. The guy told the thugs to go back to their work, as he had to think about how to catch the girl he had lost thanks to them. The thug stammered and asked what exactly the girl had done to the Chancellor. Heidi replied that she had ruined his robe and now had to make up the cost. The girl, who had been behind the cash register the entire time, approached the Chancellor and said that Armonia had gone to the village of Hov, saying that she wanted to go to the capital. Armonia could barely get her feet over the path. She was tormented by the thought that she would have to drag herself to the village for another 3 days. Lime, noticing the exhausted look on the girl's face, asked if she was all right. The girl mumbled and said she wasn't at all. Armonia crouched down on the ground and said that her legs had gotten awfully heavy. Fairy, the fairy, also noticed that her friend was feeling incredibly heavy. She said she wished she could see the face of the man who rented all the carriages. Suddenly, Armonia heard the sounds of wheels. Apparently, they were the same carriages from the village of Wyvern. The girl took Lime and Fairy and ordered them to hide until the carriages passed. The girl had the feeling that the carriages were traveling so fast, as if someone was chasing them. Suddenly, she heard another sound that sounded like a roar. It was a wyvern that was chasing the carriages. The wyvern grabbed one of the carriages and tossed it into the air. It was too loud, but Armonia managed to hear what it was saying. The animal was demanding the humans give her child back to her. Armonia asked Fairy and Lime to sit in hiding while she intervened in the matter. She wanted to reunite the wyvern with her family because she treasured her as much as the girl treasured her friends. Armonia crept closer, realizing that the baby wyvern must be somewhere in the carriage. She needed to find the cub quickly before the creature raged even more. Suddenly, the girl was pushed to the ground by the knight, telling her to stay out of the way because the situation was very dangerous. Out of the corner of her eye, Armonia saw a shiny round egg in the carriage, which was a wyvern egg. The egg looked exactly like the wyvern egg the girl had seen before. She had to get it back soon so that the wyvern would calm down. The egg was very heavy. Armonia remembered how the other monsters lifted it easily. Here she thought she could do it. However, with such a heavy weight, she was not comfortable at all. The girl needed to quickly report to the wyvern leader that the egg was in this spot. Looking up, the girl noticed that there were several wyverns in the air. She immediately located the leader by the scar over his eye and his unusually large size. Armonia began yelling for the leader to come down. The huge wyvern landed right in front of the girl, saying that it gave off an interesting sweet smell. The girl pointed her finger at an egg lying on the ground. The wyvern immediately rejoiced that it had found its child that had been taken from it. The creature said that now it needed to thank the girl, but it was not going to stop raging. The girl interrupted the animal and said that if all the people in the neighborhood died and she had no carriages left, she would have no choice but to walk to the capital. So she took the leader of the wyverns by the paw and told him to stop and stop the attack. The wyvern snorted and said that Armonia was no different from the rest of the humans, but the girl immediately started making excuses, saying that she just needed a carriage to travel to the capital. Wyvern was surprised and asked the girl why she needed to travel to the capital. Armonia said that she was going to meet with whoever was leading the raid on Voltar Forest and ask him not to do it. Wyvern suddenly recognized the girl. She had once come to see the child that the monsters of Voltar Forest had brought with them. The animal had seen Armonia for the first time since that day. The girl had grown so much that the creature didn't even manage to recognize her. The wyvern said that the humans still couldn't calm down, but looking at the girl, she was ready to back off. The creature strained its strong legs and wings and rose up, flying away. Lime and Fairy ran up to Armonia, saying that she was forever making them worry about her. The girl apologized and said she was fine already. Armonia heard a familiar voice. It was the Chancellor saying that everyone shouldn't relax as the wyverns might come again. Armonia didn't pay any attention to it. She realized that she should get on the road. In any case, the people on the carriage could catch up with her. The girl, along with her friends, stopped in a large clearing. She suggested that they spend the night here and set off early in the morning. Everyone liked the idea. The girl's stomach was rumbling. She was very hungry, but she only had some jerky with her. Fairy said there had to be some fruit nearby, but since they couldn't smell anything, the people had probably already picked it. Armonia took out 2 sticks of dried meat from her backpack and held them out to Fairy and Lime. The girl suggested looking for logs to roast the meat and make it a bit tastier. 3 days passed. A completely exhausted Armonia finally reached the village. She needed to find a place to sleep and wash up as soon as possible, then buy some food and book a map. The girl was being watched by the Chancellor, who said that she had taken 24 hours longer to reach the village than he had counted on. He didn't hesitate to remind her of her debt. The girl recognized him by his voice. She didn't even have the strength to yell at him like she had that time to use the method the witch had taught her, and there was no one around. The Chancellor asked the girl if she was listening to him, as they had a lot to discuss. The girl replied that she didn't really feel like talking to him at all. Armonia saw the Chancellor begin to reach out his hand to her. She realized that if he grabbed her, she wouldn't be able to break free this time. She rapped him with her stick and ran away. The Chancellor also didn't realize what he had done again. The girl hid around the corner, finally exhaling. Fairy said that she too was starting to get pissed off with this annoying guy. Their paths with the girl kept crossing. It was clearly no coincidence. Armonia rented a room and immediately collapsed on the bed. She told the monsters not to leave the room today just in case. In the back of her mind, she wished very much not to meet Heidi again. Sighing, Armonia accepted the fact that she had been unlucky since she was a little girl. While everyone else was finding magical stones, she only got pretty pebbles. And as for trees, she climbed the ones that were sure to have beehives. But it was all right, because the other monsters always helped her at times like this. But this time, when she saw the Chancellor in front of her again, no one could help her anymore. Haida smiled. He said that when coincidence repeats itself, it is inevitable. His meeting with the girl was predetermined by fate. Armonia realized that the man who bought the capital carriages going from the village to the village of Hof was the Chancellor. He admitted that he needed more carriages than he had thought. The boy said that no matter how many times he tried to catch the girl, she kept running away. And now it was finally time for him to be able to talk to her. Armonia was tired of such insolence, for he didn't even have a thought that he had done anything wrong. The girl turned around and started to walk away. Haida was visibly upset that the girl was so unwilling to talk to him. The Chancellor said he had heard that the girl was going to the capital. He, smiling, offered her a ride in his carriage. Armonia realized that it would be definitely difficult for her to walk. Even reaching this village, she almost died. However, it was not the beginning that she should have trusted this guy. The girl thought back to the Chancellor's words. She was worried that he and his men might capture Fairy and Lime and then put them in one of his carriages. So she said she was renouncing the lad's help. Haida asked the reason for the girl's refusal. He said that Armonia had nothing to lose. He added that if the girl didn't go with him, she could probably rent a carriage there. He smiled evasively, however, and said he planned to buy up all the carriages there as well. The guy said that on the way there, he and his men were attacked by a Wyvern. There ended up being a lot of casualties, more than he thought. He added that one of his knights said he saw a man dressed in a brown robe in the forest when he was attacked by the Wyverns. It was clear that Haida recognized the image of this man as Armonia. He took the girl by the shoulder and said that he was merely wondering how she had managed to chase the Wyverns away. The girl brushed the guy's hand off her shoulder. She needed to arrive at the next village before the Chancellor at all costs. Since he kept mentioning the color of her cloak, she couldn't wear it anymore. She decided to get a new cloak and something to eat, and then head straight out afterward. The guy asked the girl where she started heading. She not intentionally answered that she was going to buy a cloak. The guy had the same goal, as he was supposedly bored with his current one. As proof, Armonia demanded that the guy throw away his robe now since he was so bored with it. Smiling, the guy ripped off his robe and threw it on the floor. The girl smiled even more and said that now she had a nice new cloak and now she didn't have to go and spend money. The guy obviously didn't expect this and ran up to the girl. He wondered why on earth she was treating him so badly. Armonia started to argue with him, remembering everything that had happened between them earlier. Of course, Heidi hadn't forgotten about the monetary compensation for the robe the girl was supposed to give him. Harmony was incredibly infuriated by such stinginess and greed for money. She did not know where she would find such a large sum to pay off her pursuer at this hour. The guy, however, said that since Armonia couldn't afford to pay right now, he could think of another way to pay. All the girl had to do was listen to him. Sighing, Armonia agreed after all. She began to listen at full attention to what the guy was going to tell her. Haida said that since the girl was going to go to the capital, he wanted to hire her. He asked if she would like to keep him company. The guy said that the girl's job would be very simple. He asked her to tell him everything she knew about monsters, but Armonia immediately refused, as it was literally considered a betrayal of friends. However, the Chancellor was not confused. He said that since this request was difficult for the girl, she could just prevent the monsters from attacking next time. The girl said that she would only help if the Chancellor's soldiers didn't touch the monsters first. She added that if a situation like yesterday happened again, she would go her own way. The Chancellor stated that they did not do anything yesterday. According to him, the Wyverns had attacked the carriage for no reason. But the girl recalled the egg that was in the carriage. The monsters had only retreated because she had given it back to them. She asked where Haida got it from. The boy said that a monster hunter was selling the egg, and he bought it at a fair price. The girl immediately asked him to introduce people. The guy literally forcibly took the baby away from the parents just because he paid for it. The guy was silent for a long time. Finally, after some time, he admitted that he was guilty. He didn't think much of it, since he had never had the chance to put himself in the shoes of monsters. He promised that he would be careful from now on. Armonia was confused. She couldn't believe that he had agreed so quickly. To her, it meant that not all was lost yet. However, she quickly pushed those thoughts away and still stood by her opinion. The guy said that he would consider the contract to be done. He also mentioned that they would have to travel about a month to the capital and asked the girl to treat him more respectfully during that time. She was the only one who spoke to him informally. Armonia was in her hotel room talking to the monsters. Lime repeated what she said about them having to travel to the capital with other people. The girl said that could be dangerous, so if the monsters didn't want that, they should have told her, and she would immediately decline the offer. Fairy said that no matter how many people they met on their path, they couldn't become their enemies. Fairy added that if Armonia agreed to it, she and Lime would be okay with it too. Fairy added that if they met any hostile people on their way to the capital, then Armonia could use the pendant that the big monster had given her at any time. Fairy approached Armonia and told her that she shouldn't worry about them. The fairy told her to do as she saw fit. She and Lime always wished her nothing but happiness. Armonia hugged her friends and thanked them from the bottom of her heart. Her strongest wish was to settle this matter and return home to his forest of Voltar as soon as possible. The girl rode in the carriage. She was extremely uncomfortable because of the bad roads. Heidi approached her on horseback and asked if she was feeling well. The girl wanted to think positively. She imagined she was riding on the shoulder of an ogre. She was setting herself up to feel good, so she was getting better. There was some sound that Armonia heard clearly. She asked the coachman to stop the carriage for a while. She wanted to check it out, so she needed to get off on the road. Armonia was sure she heard someone's footsteps. She crouched down on her knees and put her ear to the ground. Though the ground rumbled, the footsteps were clearly lighter than an ogre. However, the number of individuals was large. Perhaps they were dwarves or ogres. The Chancellor approached the girl and asked if they were monsters. Armonia replied that it was quite possible. They had better go through the forest. A knight came out of the carriage of all things. He was furious that they were going to have to run away from monsters. The man started mentioning the damage that the wyverns had done to them. This was their chance to get revenge on the monsters. The girl interrupted the knight and said that they wouldn't be able to handle that many anyway. The Chancellor was of the same opinion. He said that he understood the knight's feelings, but they were obliged to act rationally, so it was best for them to avoid encounters with monsters as much as possible. The girl looked at the knights preparing for battle. She didn't understand how they could go into battle without knowing what kind of monster was going to appear and how big it was. Armonia tried with all her might to resolve the situation. She asked the knights not to panic and suggested that they just leave quietly. She repeated over and over that the oncoming herd of monsters were no match for them. Haida smiled and asked the girl if she could just control the monsters coming this way. He recalled her saying that she could do that. The girl had asked Haida to dissuade the knights from doing such a foolish thing, unless he wanted to say hello to the monsters and risk his life. The Chancellor was outraged. He said that until he came to the capital, he didn't want to meet any monsters, so he hired the girl. The knight approached the girl and asked how many dozens there must be in the herd of oncoming monsters, since she said they were unable to resist. Armonia said that she was talking about hundreds and thousands of monsters that were expected to show up any minute now, but her words were interrupted by the ogres coming up, the monsters that the girl didn't want to meet the most. The girl immediately told Haida to leave as soon as possible. He was confused at her suggestion to leave the others and just leave. Armonia, on the other hand, said that she had suggested to the other knights to leave this place, but they didn't listen to her. In Haida's mind, the terrible picture from his childhood came back to mind. He had promised himself that there should be no more senseless sacrifices. Seeing how many ogres were in front of him, the Chancellor grabbed his head with both hands and fell to the ground, being attacked by panic. The girl looking on didn't understand what was happening to him. Armonia ran up to one of the knights and ordered him to pick the guy up and take his feet away. She said that if they kept running down the path, they could get out of the forest. The man in lats agreed to this and immediately rushed to carry out the order. As the carriages pulled away, the ogre leader asked Armonia why she hadn't moved. The girl greeted him in their language, which surprised the monsters. Fairy intervened, asking the ogre leader to stay away from Armonia. The monsters were surprised that the girl was walking in company with the rest of the creatures from the forest. Armonia made her demand that the ogres cease their pursuit and just let the humans go. The leader of the ogres, on the other hand, had heard that the knights were preparing an attack, and if he left them alone, the death of his clan would eventually be inevitable. Armonia said that she was going to straighten things out and was on her way to meet with the human commander. She confessed that she came from the Voltaire forest, and from now on it was her duty to protect her home and her family. The leader of the ogres had heard of the girl. She was known for being bred by the monsters of the Voltaire forest. The monster sniffed at Armonia and said that she gave off a pleasant sweet odor. Now he understood why the monsters of the forest treated her so well. The girl thanked him for the compliment, asking him to trust her. However, the leader of the monsters couldn't do that. Armonia, on the other hand, said that killing all the knights would be very difficult. She could only use them to get to the negotiations with the head of the offensive operation. But still, the lizards couldn't come back with nothing. After all, they had engaged an entire army. Their feelings were stirring inside them, and they didn't want to tarnish their honor. The girl realized that the leader of the ogres was hinting at a sacrifice of similar weight in return for fulfilling her request. Whichever way Armonia looked at it, she didn't think the monsters would let her go so easily. Still, she was going to make another contract. Armonia suggested that the lizards follow the road and come upon a village where humans lived. They had cordially provided carriages to destroy the monsters, and now the Ludo lizards had an excuse to attack them and leave the carriages alone. The girl realized that the burden of that price would be borne by the lizard men, and it didn't faze her at all. With a sigh of displeasure, the lizard leader agreed to the deal. The girl asked him to wait and answer how he knew about the raid if no one had told him about it. The lizard said that he had been told about it by someone in a cloak. He thought he had smelled this stranger's scent somewhere before, but it was too murky to identify. This stranger was not human, so he spoke the language of the monsters. Finishing his story, the lizard began to walk away. Armonia was getting very tired of this conversation. She realized that she had only wasted her energy and wondered why she even had to do such a thing. The girl blamed everything on the knights, and after all, she had warned them. Armonia walked alone through the forest trails again. She didn't see any carriages anywhere nearby. At any rate, however, it was the running away that she thought people were best at. The girl heard voices nearby. Chancellor Haida was telling one of his knights that they should go in search of the girl, since it was getting dark. Armonia was glad to have finally found the carriages, but she was surprised by the hostile atmosphere that reeked from Haida. He was clearly very angry. One of the knights asked the Chancellor if he really wanted to go back after falling into a state of panic at the sight of the lizards. He said he felt sorry for Armonia, but it was better for them to go on their way. Haida said it was precisely because the knights hadn't listened to her. He kept saying that they couldn't act so irresponsibly now. Armonia couldn't even imagine that things would turn out this way. She didn't understand why the guy who was bothering her all the time started caring about her. The girl finally stepped into the situation and asked what had managed to happen that was so terrible during her absence. The Chancellor, of course, was very happy to see his companion. Haida asked how Armonia had managed to get away unscathed from the huge number of lizards. However, the girl did not want to answer that question and said that it was a secret she could not reveal. The Chancellor said that he was happy to see Armonia safe and sound. However, at this time, the knights could not believe their eyes that the girl managed to escape unharmed from the lizards. The knight said that it was in the common interest to reveal the girl's secret. They were obliged to share with each other the ways in which they could kill the monsters. Armonia admitted that she had no thoughts of killing anyone. Besides, she wasn't like the other knights at all. Even if she knew about the methods of killing monsters, she would never share them with the knights in her life. The knight was unspeakably angry. Armonia said that he would probably never be able to defeat a monster in his life, even if she told him how to do it. She said that if the knight could swipe a couple times with his sword, it didn't make him a talented monster hunter. For saying that, the knight grabbed the girl and started calling her nasty words. The Chancellor, looking at this, immediately intervened and pushed the knight aside. He said that he should not talk like that to the man to whom he owed his life. Haida said that the knights who were blinded by vengeance ended up running away without ever assessing the situation. Without Armonia's help, they would have become playthings for the ogres by now. The Chancellor put his arm around the girl's shoulder and said it was time for them to continue on their way. He added that this time Armonia could sit up front next to the coachman. As she sat on the carriage, the girl expected that there would be a lot of people in this convoy who were by no means the best opinion of monsters. She didn't know what she should do, since Fairy and Lime must have heard the whole conversation. However, the girl was worried for nothing. The Chancellor immediately rode up to her on horseback and admitted that he was belated in his thanks. The boy told her thanks from the bottom of his heart for saving them. If it wasn't for Armonia, they would have died right on the spot. Haida said that since they had made a pact, it was time for him to hear the girl's name. A worried thought flashed through Armonia's mind, but she immediately said her name. The Chancellor liked it very much, but he wanted to ask one more question. The guy wondered what purpose the girl was traveling to the capital. She said that she wanted to meet Chancellor Heidi. Based on what she heard, concern immediately appeared on Haida's face. Guy asked why on earth the girl wanted to see the Chancellor in person. Armonia said it was already a secret and asked what the guy's name was. By the edge of her ear, she thought the man in the village had called him Candy. The coachman, overhearing the conversation, wanted to tell the whole truth about the Chancellor, but he was interrupted by Conde himself. He smiled and confirmed the girl's words that his name was Candy. Armonia said that if she met Conde and Chancellor, she would tell the guy about it. So if he was curious about what she wanted to talk to him about, she asked him to go to her in person. After a while, Haida dismounted from his horse and said that the clouds covered the moon, so visibility became poor. And judging by the distance, they would not be able to reach the next village today. The Chancellor suggested that they wait in the forest until morning, when the paths would be much clearer than they were now. He asked if Armonia agreed with this decision. The girl was confused by such a question. She didn't understand why a guy would ask her such things. She thought there was no difference, as long as they didn't go deep into the forest. However, the knights must have wandered through and into it often. Armonia replied that she didn't care. She added that if they didn't listen to her this time either, it would be very low. The Chancellor said he would keep that in mind. The girl asked for something. She said that no one should go deep into the forest. If anyone needed anything, they should go to her. Also, one was not to touch unknown fruits in the forest and stay away from baby monsters. The Chancellor said that he and his men would of course fulfill all three of the girl's requests. Armonia asked to tell the knights that the price of their foolish choice was very high. And if the Chancellor was unable to take on such a burden, then let him not bother the men unnecessarily and follow her quietly. Armonia turned around and said she was going to rest. Following her, the Chancellor expressed his gratitude and said that he was glad to have made a treaty with her. Ignoring these words, the girl went inside the hut as soon as possible to comfortably spend the night. Opening her bag, Armonia let out Fairy and Lime, who had clearly lingered there. The girl apologized to her friends for making them spend so much time in the stuffiness because of the people. Lime, on the other hand, said she shouldn't worry about it. He was even starting to feel like he was getting used to being in the bag. Fairy, however, was as angry as ever. She said she was normal, but more than anything, she wanted to teach the humans who looked down on Armonia a lesson. Armonia saw her friends looking rather energetic. That couldn't help but make her happy. She needed to gather her thoughts, though. Right now, it felt as if not a whole day had actually passed. Normally, days didn't turn out to be this long for her. The sky had gone completely black. Night had replaced the day. It was time for everyone to rest and forget the day that had happened, for even greater accomplishments awaited everyone tomorrow. A few days later, Armonia was riding in a carriage on the run. She asked the coachman if they could increase the speed. The coachman would not have refused to do so, but the horses were too exhausted for that. Armonia thought they would all be able to avoid encountering the orcs because of their small numbers, but these creatures were too fast and formidable to leave anyone alone. Looking at the presence of weapons on the orcs, Armonia realized that they were ready to attack the carriages. Usually these creatures didn't attack humans first, but this time there was something wrong. Haida caught up with the girl's carriage. She asked him if they were still far away from the village. She thought they needed to get away from the monsters as soon as possible and hide there. The Chancellor replied that they had to travel a little farther. The girl noticed that the expression on the guy's face was slowly starting to deteriorate. If they suddenly found themselves in the clutches of the monsters this time too, he would definitely lose his mind. The only way to get away from the orcs was to use the poison powder that Fairy had. Fairy said that she didn't really like doing things to people, but since Armonia asked about it, she would fulfill the request. She took off and asked the girl to rely on her. Turning his head, Haida saw the orc suddenly fall to the ground. He was puzzled. Under the influence of the pollen, the orcs should have slept for about 10 hours. That should have been enough time to reach the village. Haida said that since the orcs were so hostile, they could attack the neighboring village to avenge such a stunt. The boy suggested finishing them off right now before they posed any danger. The girl said that was out of the question. She asked the coachman to touch as soon as possible, but Haida stopped her and asked her to think hard. He was quite perceptive and realized that he didn't know something about Armonia and her relationship with the monsters. Armonia quickly realized and lied about hearing the sounds of other monsters, so they didn't have to pull the cat by the tail and get to the village as soon as possible. The guy ended up trusting her after all. The girl reflected on the fact that Haida was going to kill creatures that weren't even able to fight. In her opinion, humans were intent on destroying any monster that was worth catching their eye. Armonia had insinuated to herself that there wasn't an ounce of pity or empathy in humans. That meant they couldn't be trusted. Finally, the carriage approached the gates of the settlement. It was just in time because Armonia was already dying of boredom. Everyone had to be inspected every time they entered the village. The Chancellor was talking to a guard. The uniformed man asked Haida to make a list and drive inside. The guy was very happy that they managed to get to the village safely. He was happy that he had listened to Armonia's words. However, he couldn't get her concerned look on her face earlier out of his mind. The girl moved closer to the Chancellor and began to look at the papers he was holding in his hands. It was a list of those present. The boy wondered why the girl didn't stay in the carriage. She was just curious as to what the Chancellor had in his hands. Examining the documents, Armonia couldn't understand why the Chancellor needed to write something down. The guy at this time was wondering if the girl's mood would improve if he spoke first. He said that this document was a record of entrances and exits in case of emergencies. The guards were especially picky because the village was the biggest checkpoint on the way to the capital. Haida held out the pass to the girl and said that it was possible to pass through with it without any problems, any checks or thorough inspections. The girl found that quite convenient. She asked if she could get exactly the same one. However, this pass was not issued without a certain status or a specific reason. Haida had said that if Armonia continued traveling with him, she wouldn't even need the pass. The girl regretted that if she had such a pass, she would be able to take one carriage and run away. A bell sounded. Usually a few blows meant the monsters were coming, and so it turned out to be. The herd of orcs that had chased the carriages a little earlier began to approach the village. Armonia couldn't believe what was happening. The orcs couldn't have gotten up so quickly. After all, they had been dispatched by Fairy's poison powder. However, it was obvious to the Chancellor. He was suggesting to kill them and then already go. He was already visualizing in his head what those orcs could do to the village. Harmony thought that she would have to guess with the head of the orcs, but it was very hard to find him in the crowd because the herd was very large. The orcs began to make some sounds, which to the guards seemed like an invitation to war. However, to Armonia, this was false information. She rushed towards the herd of orcs to try and negotiate again. Haida grabbed the girl by the arm, asking if she was really willing to go to meet the orcs. He asked her to at least make a plan, since orcs referred to monsters that ate humans. The girl said that if she thought like the Chancellor, no one would accomplish anything. Those words made the Chancellor think for a while. What if that day he too, like Armonia, had tried to do something? But he immediately pushed those thoughts away, thinking that Armonia had some hidden method, which was why she had rushed to escape like that. After all, she was the person who had spared everyone from the lizard attack. Armonia. also tried to set up Fairy as well. She said that the orcs couldn't be approached any closer. Orcs were mindless monsters, so talking to them properly wouldn't work. Besides, they hated humans with all their hearts. Fairy wondered why the girl cared so much about humans. Had she begun to value them more than the monsters? Armonia, on the other hand, was surprised at such a question and asked why her friends suddenly had such questions. Armonia approached the herd of orcs, inviting their leader for a conversation. But the head orc wanted to ask one question as well. He slowly asked if it was true that humans had started the war. That was why he had brought his army. The orc said that the faces of the humans were very scared. They were not in the mood for war. He added that if the humans don't fight, they won't attack either. Armonia said that it was true that the humans were preparing for a raid that would start from the Voltar forest. And as everyone knew, there were many hidden resources in that forest that the humans wanted very badly to get their hands on. But the girl swore that she would prevent that from happening. Armonia's words were interrupted by an arrow fired from the direction of the village. It fell right in front of the orcs' feet. This meant to the monsters that the war was starting after all. They rushed into battle. Armonia grabbed the orc leader by the arm, asking him to stop. He sharply shoved her away, causing everyone around the village to worry. The girl fell to the floor. Her friends immediately started swinging at the orc, asking what the orc was allowing himself. The girl got to her feet and asked the orcs to be patient this time. She wanted to live with the monsters in peace, so she went along with it. She wanted to explain everything in detail to the orcs in the house. She promised that she would explain everything she wanted to do for them in the future. The orcs were a little hesitant. The leader said they were all angry, but they heard the girl's words. They thought that she should be listened to. The herd began to greet the girl as the first human guest. Armonia was glad that she was able to extinguish the sudden outburst of anger in the orcs. The humans must not have heard their conversation, judging by the look on the Chancellor's face. The guards of the village started asking the Chancellor if the orcs were really retreating. Even Haida himself didn't realize what was going on. It seemed that Armonia had agreed on something with them, but it appeared absurd to him. Haida had said that if Armonia died, all his plans for the future would come to a screeching halt. They didn't include Armonia being taken over by monsters. He grabbed the guard by the scruff of the neck, who said that Armonia was doomed and said that no one would die today. He asked him to bring the man in charge of the village and tell him that he wanted to see him in person. The man asked Haida why he had come to see him in person, being very busy. The Chancellor said that there were mercenaries in the village who behaved as they pleased in an emergency situation when monsters attacked without orders from higher-ups. He called the village chief because he wanted to look into the eyes of the person in charge. That responsible person turned out to be Baron Pecan. Haida said that whatever the reason was, it was the reason his guide was captured. He said that, as in charge, the Baron should take responsibility for what happened. The Chancellor said he needs his guide not only to point the way right now, but also in the future. Haida ordered the Baron to gather all available soldiers and transfer his guide to him no matter what. The Baron slammed his fist on the table and said that was impossible. He said that the request to gather all the knights in the village for the sake of saving one man was thoughtless. Haida recognized that the damage would be enormous, and the likelihood of success was slim, but he did not need any guide as he did not fit all the criteria. The Chancellor said that any guide he needed must know the monsters well, be able to identify their movements so he could take further action, and be able to speak a common language with them. These were the qualities that any guide would need to have in order for the Chancellor to reach the capital without getting into any fights with the monsters. The Baron didn't understand what this had to do with a guide, couldn't believe there were such people in the world at all. The Chancellor said that if his guide was able to do this, the matter concerning the raid on monsters would be simplified. Haida added that just by bringing back his guide, he would be able to exterminate all the monsters in this world. In that case, the amount of unnecessary damage would also be reduced. The Baron said that he understood what the Chancellor wanted to tell him. However, he also needed to think about the damage he would incur right now. He couldn't sacrifice tables of people for just one person. Haida asked the Baron since when did he think about the majority. As far back as he could always remember, the Baron had always gathered a few that could bring him money. Rumors had reached him that said that his estate could get drugs banned in the Empire, the price of which was very high. The Baron tried to deny it and asserted to the Chancellor that the information he had heard was nonsense. Haida took him by the arm and told him that he had better not know why he was saying this. That was far from all the Chancellor knew about the Baron. The Baron himself, however, hoped that Haida was bluffing, or really knew about all the weaknesses of the aristocratic families of the Empire. Whatever it was, it wouldn't do him any good if he ruined the guy's mood. Finally, he broke down and said that he would gather the soldiers. The Baron interrupted Haida and said he was absolutely certain that no matter how many hundred knights he gathered, every last one of them would be killed on the spot. It was like a moth flying straight into the flames. Besides, there was no guarantee that the guide Haida spoke of would help him in the raid. After listening to the Baron to the end, Haida walked out the door and slammed the door loudly. He began to wonder if he had pushed the village chief too hard. What on earth was he hoping for, not even knowing where the orc habitat was located? He was only overwhelmed with simultaneous thoughts of Armonia's return. He agreed that he should reconsider the plan, since the orcs had a habit of raising humans, so they shouldn't kill the girl right away. As soon as Haida left the room, he saw in front of him a red-haired guy named Kun, who was a high-ranking and widely known person in the village. Haida turned to him for help. Armonia was in the orcs' camp at this time. She was full of all kinds of fruits. She was ready to eat all of them until they ran out. Though even if there was a little left to eat, her quantity wouldn't decrease because the orcs would bring more. After finally getting full, she asked the head of the orcs to begin the conference. The head of the orcs was worried if the girl would have enough food. He dragged another basket with him, but the girl interrupted him and wanted to finally ask how word of the raid had reached them if they lived in such a wilderness. The orc leader said that a hooded man came to him once, just like Armonia. He said that the humans would declare war, and if the monsters did nothing, everyone would suffer greatly. Armonia asked if the man had any other signs by which he could be recognized. The orc racked his brain. He remembered that the man still had a drawing on his cheek and slightly prominent red-colored eyes. The man reeked of a murky but dull energy that even seemed malicious. The orc had encountered such a feeling before as well. The man reeked of demon energy. Armonia couldn't believe such words. She asked the orc if he really wasn't wrong. The girl could not believe that such information was reported to the orc by a demon. They rarely left their world, and usually did nothing for anyone without benefiting from it. The orc didn't know why the demon had come to them, but he could feel the demon's energy. He was sure of it. Also, Armonia realized that orcs couldn't lie. However, she couldn't be completely sure of the monster's words. The orc asked the girl why on earth she had come here and was helping them. Armonia scratched her head and said that she was heading straight to the center where the humans lived. There was a human head there that she was going to ask for the raid to be canceled. It seemed to her that it made a lot more sense to just have a talk than to start mindlessly fighting. The orc had said that idea might have been perfectly reasonable. Still, he had more confidence in the girl than in the honesty of the humans. Armonia assured him that if she talked to the Chancellor, a situation like this would not arise again. Armonia noticed Lime, who had managed to grow incredibly large from being very full. She asked the head of the orcs if there was nothing wrong with him eating everything. The leader said that he himself had offered his guests a snack. Besides, he was aware of the fact that slimes love to eat. Lime yawned and said that after his belly got full, his eyes started to slip. Armonia told him that he shouldn't sleep right after eating. She instructed him to hang on for a while until it was digested. The orc looked at Armonia. He said he could never understand the decision of the brothers from Voltaire Forest. Fairy asked why he would want to change the conversation so abruptly to such a topic. The orc wondered why the monsters had decided to send this precious girl straight to the lair of the humans. If the decision was up to him, he would never have allowed such a thing to happen, for he was certain that the human people were cruel and dangerous. Fairy agreed with the orc's words. However, this was a choice that Armonia herself had made. She said that she would go deal with it on her own. The monsters wanted to stop her, but nothing came of her determination. The orc said that Armonia definitely had the strongest ability to charm all the monsters. The girl possessed immense power that could not be resisted. Perhaps that was why the dragon of Voltaire Forest kept watching her. He must have been very worried about her. Armonia said it was impossible not to worry. However, as long as Armonia shone, no one should let up. To continue to protect the girl's light was the forest's responsibility. As morning came, the orcs saw Armonia off. They said that they were very happy to see visitors after a long time. He asked the girl to tell them when things were resolved. Armonia was terribly tired. She hadn't even gotten 10 minutes of sleep in 3 days. She wanted to get back to the village soon and get a good night's sleep. Lime looked at his friend and asked if she was all right. Armonia said that as of late, her head had been going round and she couldn't get her thoughts together. Fairy flew closer to her friend. She said that if Armonia was really tired, they could wait until she got some sleep. The girl agreed with her fairy's words. She said that it would be an incredibly long walk to the village, so she leaned her back against a tree and began to close her eyes little by little. For humans, sleep was very important. Armonia didn't think she would be in so much pain if she just didn't sleep. She had a long journey ahead of her, so she couldn't sleep much. But she could afford to take a little break. The girl finally fell asleep. Fairy said she should have been much more persistent in stopping Armonia when she decided to talk to the orcs. What her friend was going through because of the humans was blowing the fairy's mind. Lime confirmed her words. He didn't know why the girl was always raring to do all the hardest work. If she hadn't gotten this far, the monsters would have won the war with the humans by now. Fairy said that Armonia was too kind to throw all the work away. She didn't want any monsters to get hurt. Lime, on the other hand, said that they couldn't let Armonia get that far outside the forest. If they had told her to stay in the safe territory of the Voltaire forest, this wouldn't have happened. The conversation between the two monsters was interrupted by a man asking if Armonia would really have stayed there safely. The man turned out to be an elf named Karis. Fairy was glad to see him, but asked the purpose of his visit since the Voltaire forest was left unprotected. The man said that he was worried that Armonia would be exhausted, so he decided to check on her for a while, so he didn't have to worry about the forest either. The elf's words were just an excuse, while using the necklace to keep an eye on her the whole time. Karis said that although he was worried about the girl, he was not constantly watching her. The necklace only alerted him in case of strong changes and Armonia's health, physical strength, and emotions. Fortunately, the girl's body was fine. She was probably just tired. Lime asked the elf if it was impossible to take the girl back to the Voltaire forest, as he was very worried about her and her health. Karis said that the monsters should let her do as she pleased. The girl was under his protection, so she shouldn't be hurt much anyway. The elf said that they were all partly to blame for keeping Armonia so close to humans for such a large amount of time. However, Lime asked what they would do if Armonia grew to love the humans more than them and left the forest. Karis said it was a vain worry, for the girl was none other than Armonia, and there was no way she could leave them. The elf was confident in his words, for the girl loved the Voltaire forest more than anyone else. Besides, it had been a long time since she had been in the family circle. The elf spread his feet shoulder-width apart, and runes appeared under his feet. One last thing before disappearing, he asked the monsters to conceal the fact that he had come here. After waiting for the elf to leave the area, Fairy said that Armonia and Karis were exactly the same. They were both complete egotists. The fairy was interrupted by Lime saying that someone was coming this way. He was sure that the sounds of footsteps belonged to humans. On the off chance that it was true, they would put Armonia in a tight spot if people noticed that the monsters were with her. To start, the fairy suggested hiding in the thicket. From there, they could easily observe the situation, and if the humans decided to inflict even the slightest bit of damage on Armonia, interrupt them. Kun complained that the Chancellor and his escort had circled the area several times already. It seemed to him that the Chancellor was striding so confidently because of the fact that the person he was looking for was indeed incredibly important to him. A man ran out of the crowd, alerting the Chancellor that he had spotted a man sleeping under a tree. Haida ran up to Armonia, beginning to examine her for any injuries. However, the girl's condition and breathing was stable. Fortunately for the Chancellor, she was unharmed. He asked Kun to send a healer to the village to examine Armonia more thoroughly. The red-haired guy wasn't fooled by the feeling that the Chancellor had already slept badly for several days in a row, which was why he was so sensitive to everything. The Chancellor lifted the girl into his arms. He was able to examine her face and her cornflower-colored hair for the first time in a long time. He remembered the words that warned him about the girl with blue eyes who controlled monsters unhindered. Putting the puzzle together, the Chancellor finally realized which girl was in front of him. He smiled and half-heartedly revealed that the girl might be a far more valuable treasure to him than he had believed. Armonia woke up in bed for the first time in a long time. However, this did not make her happy. She jumped out of bed, starting to look for Lamb and Fairy. She worried if the humans had captured them. The girl threw a blanket over her head and ran out the door. She wanted to find the monsters before it was too late. Suddenly, rushing down the hallway, she ran into Chancellor Heidi. Haida asked the girl where she was in such a hurry and why she had a blanket over her head. The girl interrupted him and told him that he should answer and what place she was in. The lad replied that the girl was sleeping in Baron Pykena's castle. The lad said he found her lying in the woods under a tree. After that, they took her to the castle. Haida admitted that after the girl was captured, a patrol roamed relentlessly to find her. Armonia said that she was feeling pretty good now and thanked the Chancellor for looking for her. The girl also asked if the guy had seen anything interesting near her when he found her. Haida said there was nothing there besides her. The girl stepped away from the Chancellor and rushed further down the hallway. Haida asked where she started to rush off to in such a hurry, but the girl said that she also had some things she needed to take care of. Haida said that the girl shouldn't be wandering around like that right after waking up. She needed to get well and rest first, and then she needed to go to the capital. The girl stopped and said that since the Chancellor had started this conversation, it was time for them to travel separately. The reason she had gotten this far was the promise she had made to him. She started counting on her fingers all the dangers she had protected the boy from. In sum, the debt for the mantle was long since paid off. These words hurt the Chancellor deeply. He was ready to fall through the ground. However, the girl kept saying that it was very difficult for her to fix something that wasn't her fault. Of course, the Chancellor wasn't at fault either, but the uncomfortable situation was repeated over and over again, so she was tired of it. The girl repeated her thanks to the guy for saving her, but assured him that he didn't need to worry about her anymore, as she wouldn't worry about him from now on. Watching as the girl was about to leave, Haida ran up to her and grabbed her in his arms. He said he wouldn't let her leave in this state. He said the girl needed to rest and recover first. Haida dragged the girl to a room and said that contracts are always made by mutual consent, which means they end too. The guy put the girl on the bed and said he still needed her help and couldn't break the contract. The girl rudely said she didn't want to do it through force. The guy, on the other hand, said that if she wanted to meet Chancellor Heidi, she couldn't have that. The Chancellor was the king's closest aide, and such a person would hardly want to meet with an unknown person like Armonia. Haida said that security was much more troublesome in the capital than in the countryside. He said that if Armonia sneaked into the territory, she would be caught immediately, and so he promised to help her. The guy said that if the girl wanted to know any additional information about the Chancellor, he could tell her. It would be beneficial to have more information for her. Armonia pushed Haida and said that she needed time to think about the Chancellor's words. He confused her by saying it out of the blue. Haida said he wasn't going to wait long. He, like the girl, was interested in getting to the capital as soon as possible. Armonia looked at Haida, who wasn't going anywhere. In fact, he had another question for Armonia. He said that he had glimpsed that the monsters that stormed the village were very many. He asked how the girl managed to get away unharmed from so many orcs. Armonia hesitated for a moment. She said that luck just happened to be on her side this time. Haida said that every time he looks at the girl, he realizes that luck is always on her side. Haida looked at the girl with a caustic look and said whether she had secured the love of the heavens or the love of the monsters. The girl rose abruptly from the bed and said that she didn't understand what the Chancellor meant by that. She added that if she continued to flounder like Heidi, it was unlikely that her luck would turn around. Armonia said that the Haida are also involved in the monster raid. She asked why on earth he was so annoyed by these creatures. The Chancellor said that monsters were creatures that did not benefit humans with their existence. On the contrary, senseless human sacrifices kept appearing because of them. And people not only wanted to reduce the number of casualties by raiding the monsters, but also wanted to extract the resources in the forest. The girl asked the Chancellor to stop talking nonsense. There were both bad and good among the people. It was the same story with monsters. Not all forest creatures were harmful to humans. Armonia asked the Chancellor to stop talking bad about them, only being in the midst of her silly prejudices. Armonia didn't understand why humans were so greedy when it came to forest resources. They didn't originally belong to them, after all. It seemed to the girl that she had told the Chancellor enough about it on the day of the incident with the Wyverns. Hearing the girl, the Chancellor asked if she was on the side of the monsters if she had such a dislike for humans. The girl herself didn't understand why the guy suddenly decided to ask her about it. The girl told the guy to forget everything she said. She was tired of talking to him. Armonia kicked the guy out the door, regardless of the fact that he claimed he hadn't finished talking yet. Once outside the walls of the room, the lad wondered what it would be like if the person he was trying to interact with was so aloof. However, the Chancellor recognized that he had better watch his words for a while, for if the girl escaped, he would be in trouble. All of Haida's plans for the future would only be accomplished with the girl's help. The girl sat alone in the room. She thought about the fact that the Chancellor was indeed right, and why she had hoped to be able to meet the man in charge of the raid as soon as she arrived in the capital. There were too many things for the girl to think about. She couldn't even ask for advice, since neither Lime nor Fairy were around her. Suddenly, outside the window, Armonia heard a familiar voice. It was Lime, crawling up the wall to get into the room. The two monsters were terribly tired as they had to travel a long way to the castle. Lime and Fairy plopped down on the bed. Slime complained that he couldn't even move one tentacle. The girl, on the other hand, said she almost went looking for them. She asked where they had been all this time. Fairy said they had secretly followed the girl when she was brought to the castle. They had intended to sneak in through the window, but had to wait until the Chancellor left. The girl said her friends did a great job. She apologized to them for making them worry so much for her. Lime said the girl didn't need to apologize. He and the Fairy were willing to do much more for her. The girl smiled and suggested that they finish talking and get the two of them cleaned up soon. After all, they weren't all dirty. Chancellor Haida entered the room. He brought the washed clothes to the girl. The girl thanked him and noticed how fresh her cloak smelled now. The girl slammed the door in the Chancellor's face, though he asked her to wait a lot. Armonia ordered him to grab his clothes and hide in the closet. Armonia opened the door a lot and told him to quickly lay out what he had to say. Haida said it had been a quarter of a day since they had talked, so he wondered if she had made a decision. Haida said that if the girl was okay with it, they would be able to leave for the capital soon. Armonia said that even though the Chancellor had given her some time, he was in a hurry. The boy approached the girl and said that she herself had said that she couldn't do anything if she thought about something for too long. Armonia would lose nothing if she agreed to the contract. However, thinking for a long time was just a waste of time. Sighing, the girl still said that the Chancellor was right. Even if she arrived the capital safely, it would be quite difficult for her to meet with a noble. Not deciding to give up too quickly, Armonia said that the guy still had no proof that he knew the Chancellor so well. Therefore, he should have proved it first. The girl felt that it would be very risky of her to trust Haida. She was only willing to believe anything the Chancellor said if he managed to convince her. Haida believed that Armonia always acted first and thought of the consequences later, but apparently there were times when she dug deep like she did now. As soon as the boy agreed, Armonia immediately started to close the door in front of him. However, he managed to stop her by using his physical strength. He was so athletic because he was trained in martial arts and fencing. He told the girl that whatever a person did, they needed to maintain their physical condition first. The girl asked why, since Honda had strength and ability, he would shake so much at the sight of monsters when he had no reason to do so at all. The Chancellor was slightly embarrassed. He said that it was something like an innate phobia. It was personal to him, so he asked the girl not to ask any more questions about it. But since the conversation about monsters had gotten this far, he decided to tell her. He asked the girl to remember the first time they had encountered the ogres. Honda said that during his childhood days, more than half of the inhabitants died when the ogre army attacked his village. He said this to the fact that the people there had nothing to do with them. Therefore, he thought he was absolutely right when he said that the monsters only caused more human casualties to appear.